Hey, everybody. So, this is going to be part of my series here where I going to turn this channel into sort of a way to change the possible outcomes of what is to come. So, instead of seeing the future, let's try to change it. And the way we're going to change it is by changing it within ourselves, by going within and shifting the possible future by doing the work within ourselves so that we can change the energy and vibration of this planet, the collective humanity, and our own trajectory. So we can't lose. If we can't shift the world or humanity, we can at least shift ourselves. The ultimate goal will be, of course, to shift all of consciousness. So let's start. And we're going to start from the beginning. So if you're watching this, you will watch this unfold. I would love you to share this with friends and whoever you think could benefit from this to try to bring this into more and more people's consciousness. The more people that go through this process with us, the better chance we have of shifting this world out of the darkness and into the light. There's been a lot of talk. I'm just going to go through each of these videos will be another step in the sort of building of our collective enlightenment, I guess. I don't know what word to call it. It's not just enlightenment, it's not just personal enlightenment, but it's also collective enlightenment. So what I'm going to say here is there has been, and I want to clarify this and explain some of the rules before we get going. And this is an important piece of information that has been withheld or misunderstood in the collective. A lot of the stuff you see spiraling around in this space is chunks and different pieces of information by people who really don't know what they're talking about, frankly, who are maybe heard or read a book and wrote another book based on something. I know this to be true because I'm a writer, right? Besides being a psychic and astrologer, I'm also a musician. I do a lot of things, but I write a lot. And I wrote a lot of books before the first one that you probably heard of, Trees for the Forest, even was put out. I wrote a couple of other books that were sort of spiritual adventure stories and based on some of my psychic and spiritual things that I had gone through. And I had gone to a conference back in the 90s where I wrote my first book was about this spiritual group I belonged to. And it was, you know, it was a first draft. I didn't expect it to go anywhere, but I was surprised at how much came out of it. But there I met someone who was working for it, who wrote a bunch of books. At the time, books were more popular. Obviously, the internet was still taking off. It hadn't come to fruition yet. Um, I met a woman who worked at a worked for a literary agent as an assistant, and a publisher was looking for a book on witchcraft or something. I think it was witchcraft. And this woman said, "Oh, I can write it." She was not a practitioner of anything spiritual. She knew nothing about the subject. She just picked a few books, threw piecemeal together, hodgepodged it up, didn't have any experience at all in terms of her knowing anything about the actual practice of any of this stuff and wrote a book and it became very popular. It was a best-selling sort of book in the category. That is a problem, okay? That thing that Oprah elevated called The Secret is very similar. They probably did some research, read some occult books, picked different pieces out, threw it into a stew and sold it to the public. I think there are a lot of things like that in the new age. And it was something that when I was coming up, as a young person and learning and delving into this very young. I was very young. I'm going to say I started investigating all this stuff when when I was probably about 10, 11, 12 years old, because I had had so many experiences. I would go to the library, read books on ESP and poltergeist and all these things, because all this strange activity that was happening, I was trying to get an understanding of it. I didn't know anybody that could help me. I went to a lot of different religions looking for answers. And I was eventually streamlined into a metaphysical path that was shamanic by nature. And of course, itself was reconstituted because, well, one of the things I was involved with was a traditional Celtic coven. And that is, I'm not sure. I mean, supposedly this was information handed down for generations, held in secret. It was supposed to be it was supposed to be guarded. It was supposed to be unbroken information. I'm skeptical of that. I don't know if that's true. The woman had no books. She was trained by supposedly people who were trained in the tradition. You never know, right? But I was also trained by someone else who was the opposite, who belonged to every single type of metaphysical psychic thing. He was born in the 20s. I met him when I was in my early 20s, and he was an old man. He was old enough to be my grandfather. He was born in the 20s. So I met him in the 90s, mid 90s or something, or early 90s. So he was probably in his 60s at the time I met him. I was 20. So he's at least 40 years older than me. And he had been on the path for more than 40 years. He was a 32nd degree Mason. And by the way, you cannot, according to him, be a 33rd degree Mason unless you're the president. It's an honorary title. So anybody who says they're a 33rd degree Mason is a liar. I talked to other Masons, and by the way, it's really not that big of a secret society. It's more like the Shriners, according to what they told me. But this guy was a seeker. He also had he knew a lot of the people involved in the early the OTA. Like, he didn't know the earliest people who invented and who started it at the turn of the century, but he knew a lot of the people that I think he knew. Israel Regardie. He knew people who knew very intimately. James Persons, I think is his name. I can't remember. He knew stories firsthand about the guy who created the Aleister Crowley. He knew, he wasn't just a practitioner and studier of Eastern, a Western kinds of shamanic traditions and magic. He was also a practitioner and a seeker in Eastern traditions as well. So he was, I mean, I can't even tell you all of the different traditions he was involved in, and he ascended to high ranks within all of them. He told me all of them. I can't remember. There were so many that he spent his life basically in pursuit of this. And when I met him, he was an older man who had kind of his own amalgamation of all the things he had studied in all the different places, were sort of put together in his own version of what we would know as the OTO, the Order Temple Orientis, which is the Golden Dawn. He had a more feminized version of it. He was more goddess focused. His was called the OTA, Order Temple Astarte. And he had his own things that he had developed, but he came from a long line of tradition. So a lot of what we did was talk about a lot of the different traditional things, talk about the different ideas in the Kabbalah. A lot of it was that. And then there was also like calling angels and just sort of very ceremonial. It was ceremonial magic. frankly, I wasn't as into the ceremonial magic as I was into natural magic, which is much more intuitive and earth-centered. But it was interesting because my left brain and my right brain, so the left brain path is a ceremonial path, and the right brain path is sort of the natural magic path, which is the shamanic path that you see reiterated in all indigenous cultures, including European indigenous cultures, native indigenous cultures around the world. It is the natural, in my opinion, it is the natural religion of humanity. It is the thing that comes most naturally to us. It uses archetypes and connection to plants and animals, and it is the natural kind of way our minds work. Joseph Campbell's work is kind of very much, and Jung's work would be sort of the sciencey side of the investigation into this natural kind of spiritual tradition that was usurped, a long time ago by monotheistic religions that were very, very violent and combative. So the difference here is natural religions, things that are natural spirituality, that use our own mind and connection to source, to other beings, to creator, to other levels of consciousness, different states, all of the stuff that goes inward, and the journey inward, which connects us to the all. This is really the root kind of basic idea among all shamanic paths. The European shamanic path became known as witchcraft when the Christians went through and paganism and killed people and burned them at the stake. So it has a negative connotation, unfortunately, but it really is no different than any of the other indigenous shamanic paths. I went that direction because I'm white and I didn't feel like it was appropriate for me to go into other people's cultural and appropriate their paths. That there was one that came out of the same lineage in terms of my my lower self, my ancestral self. So that was appropriate for me to do. All, again, research has shown that this is the ideas that are within all of the indigenous shamanic paths are ubiquitous. They're almost identical. And some of the gods and goddesses are the same and even have similar names. Now, I'm going to talk about this a little bit because you cannot separate these ideas out like what has happened in the New Age. And I'm going to put it in terms that as a Western 21st century person, you can kind of get and understand. The way that the shamanic paths work and the misunderstanding of monotheistic religions in terms of how they function is monotheistic religions like Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, which all have the same God, who, by the way, doesn't call himself the only God in the Bible, calls himself the only God you need to worship or should worship. And if you don't, you should die. The way that it works is the Kabbalah is a great sort of ancient Jewish retaining the old ways into the new, folded into the monotheistic part of it, but it's the ancient wisdom that comes before the monotheistic worship of Yahweh. So all of those different things on the tree, which I have right here, a better version of this. I made this big old painting of it. So here is Kether. These are the pillars of the tree. I'm not going to go into all of it, but here's where we are. This is Malkuth. This is the earth. These are different pathways to Kether. One is feminine side and one is a masculine side. And this is the neutral side. This is, you don't normally see this is Duluth, which is hidden. But I put it in here. So basically, Kether is the universal mind. It is the true one universal mind, the animating force of all. The ancient Jews, which were pagan, they came up with a sort of framework that carried it on without its all of its sort of tradition, its connections to the archetypal beings that they used to worship. Here's an important piece I want to make, point I want to make before I go on, is that the way, now it depends on the person, but the way that I conceive of this, and I think I have it right, and the way that the people who I most resonate with think about this, because I can't say that it's universally the same for everyone, but I think this is the truth, is that the archetypes that Jung used, that are talked about by Joseph Campbell, are the same things as the goddesses and gods. They are different aspects of our personality. And the goddesses and gods of old that people worshipped as gods and goddesses were gods and goddesses with little g. They were not all encompassing, creative, universal mind beings. They were gods and goddesses that represented different aspects of ourselves that we resonate with. So the way I think about it is psychologically. We all have a personality type or a way of being that resonates with some kind of an archetype. In our culture now, celebrities kind of fill that role. And I think this is why they're worshipped in a way. But in ancient times, the gods and goddesses represented, like I said, if you needed help with getting pregnant, you would pray to a certain goddess. If you wanted your home protected, you would, ask Hera for protection. If you wanted to win a battle, you would go to Athena and maybe Ares or Mars. So each of these different gods and goddesses had a different aspect of our personality. And the way I look at it in our cultural context is these are different aspects of ourselves. These different parts of us that are warring, that are spiritual, there are gods and goddesses of psychic ability, and there are gods and goddesses that represent creativity. Anything that humans have done, there's a god or goddess that represents that basic idea. So we're basically talking to aspects of ourself and our collective consciousness. The gods and goddesses represent that. They are a stepping stone to the next level of consciousness, like in this situation here. We are normally encased in a meat suit that disables our ability to transcend. These gods and goddesses give us the next step up on the ladder of consciousness and sort of focus our attention on different aspects of the self that we want to explore and transform and change and push towards a future to make better, to work through certain issues, to exaggerate in ourselves so that we can become better people or more integrated. And those aspects, those archetypal images of those gods and goddesses are a gateway to the next level, which is the collective consciousness and the actual creator. What is the creator as I see it? The creator as I see it is the entire multiverse. All of us are sparks of creator that are infinite and go on and become that never die. Our energy constantly evolves just like the trees and the plants and the birds and the earth and the sun and the stars and the everything, all the creatures and beings and life that exists in this universe is part of the universal matrix, that is part of the universal mind, that is part of the collective consciousness of creator. Creator itself is an energy of love and union and perfection. It has no judgment. It is pure love. It is the force that pulls all things together, that is compassion, kindness, forgiveness, all the things that Jesus taught that we need to be are what the collective consciousness of the universal mind, the creator, the creative force, the animating force of all life is. There is an opposite force. That opposite force is chaos, disorder. It is the thing in this universe that gives us free choice and free will. It is allowed in this space, in this universe, in order for us to evolve. It is not fully real. It is Maya, like, the Eastern philosophy says it's an illusion. It is an illusion created for our own growth, and it's temporary. So the pain we suffer here isn't meant to hurt us. It's meant to teach us. And as we evolve out of this space where we no longer need to make choices, where we always have chosen to do the right thing, and we always focus on the love, connection, and oneness and unity with Creator, we evolve out of coming to this binary universe. That's what I think. Eventually, we incarnate as other things. Maybe we, as in other universes where there isn't that choice, where we are just in a flow of energy. Maybe we stay on the other side. I'm not sure. I have ideas about that. And I have other elements to this. I'm not going to get into detail with all this, but this is the basic framework. It's important to understand that, because when you delve into the space of using your energy and your connection and your source energy and put it out into this universe with intention, you are making a choice to change the flow of energy in this world, which has consequence. Even if you choose to do good, it has consequence. We cannot force people to do good or be good. We cannot force people to make the right choices, to do the right things. All we can do is be the best version of ourselves and inspire others to want to open up and do the same. I say this because energy put out, even if well-intended, like they say, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. Even if good intentions are there, can have bad consequences. I'll give you an example. When I was 18 and I was learning magic, I had had some very intense experiences, which I talk about sometimes on the Cosmic Fold, which will be on tomorrow on Wednesday night. It's at Wednesday nights. We talk a lot about all this stuff on the Cosmic Fold, so you should tune into that show. It's me, Helen, and Deborah Beeksma. I'll talk about consciousness and different experiences, and it's open for other people to join. So you should join us. It's on her channel. Deborah's Cosmic Fold. When I was 18 and in the throes of all this stuff early on, and I was having intense and extreme experiences, which led me to the path that I ended up on. One of the things that happened, the first thing that happened was I have a bad back. You may or may not know, but I had a very serious injury as a 12-year-old that ended up making me disabled for a year. I was laying in bed. It's a whole story. And I have permanent back problems as a result of that. And when I was 18 at school, I got bronchitis really bad. And I coughed and coughed and coughed. And I coughed so hard that I actually slipped a disc. So this was into learning all this magic and stuff and doing magic with my good friend who is now transitioned and her sister, and a couple of other people would join us as well sometimes. So it was very powerful, and they decided, because I wasn't getting better with any kinds of treatment, to go ahead and try to do a healing on me with me there, obviously. And because I had gone to physical therapy, it was making it worse. It was a big problem. So I was laying down. They did this healing for me. And literally, instantly, I was healed. I could walk. I had no problems. Granted, it's not like it completely reconfigured my back, but that particular problem was gone. And so I was like, wow, this is amazing. Healing is great, right? So their mother that summer, after this year long of doing all this stuff, I went back to Chicago. They were still in California, but they went to visit their mother and father in Chicago. Ironically, they also came from the same town as, same basic area as me. They both came from Chicago. They lived in a different area than I did, but they were there visiting, and they contacted me and told me what was going on. Their mother was had lupus, very, very, very severe lupus, and also had a brain aneurysm. And this lupus was so intense, it was so out of control. The surgeon said they couldn't operate on her, and she was going to die from the brain aneurysm. Because if they would go in there, lupus is a blood disease, she would have bled to death. So we got together, and it's a whole thing, and you can probably find the story somewhere, and some point I'll tell it, and maybe on Substack or somewhere else it'll come out, but I'm not going to, this point isn't all about that. It's about the other aspect of it. So basically what happened is we did this very powerful raising of energy for the mother across the street from the hospital in this park. And it was insane. That's all I can tell you. It was really weird. And I was like, okay, that seems like really powerful. The next day, my friend Mary calls me and says, you're not going to believe this, but the doctors say she has no traces of lupus, and they think it was a diagnosis. And she said, but I know it's not. She's been suffering with lupus for like 30 years. She was diagnosed for years and years and years ago. So that's not true. So they did the surgery. She lived. And her lupus eventually came back. And other problems too. And my friend Mary was trying to heal her. She was using a crystal and pulling negative. And her mother started screaming, "Stop it! Stop it! I don't want to be healed. I want to die." And Mary continued, I think, to heal. And eventually, there was sort of like a fight, like, let us heal you, but she didn't want to be healed. And she slowly got worse and worse. And she ended up having 10 long, sad, drawn out years where she ended up in a nursing home and refused any kind of help from us and didn't want to get better. She wanted to die. And there were reasons for that I'm not going to go into. And it taught me something very, very important at that point, that even the best intentions to heal somebody can be bad if it is against their will. And here is the primary directive when doing this work. It's so important that I believe it is actually part of our problem right now, and part of the reason our world is in complete chaos. You have no right to infringe or impose your will on anyone else. We are all equal. You don't have the right to do that. You don't have the right to heal someone who doesn't want to be healed. You don't have the right to get a job that you don't deserve just because you want it. There is an order, a universal order that we agree to when we come in. There is a lesson plan, as it were. And while we can modify those plans and we can choose to be better as individuals and level up and pull ourselves out of that and ascend out of it, we each have to choose that. We can't enforce that or force others to do that. My problem with a lot of the information that has been taken into the New Age space and proliferated across YouTube and other places is manifestation is fine as long as it's on you and you leave it to the universe to handle or do it however it seemed fit. Meaning you want to do some kind of work on having a better life. Well, put it to the universe. I want to be more secure financially. Okay, then however the universe sees fit, let that come to be. So that means things will come to you. You may have a different path that evolves, and it will happen naturally. And you have to give it time and space, and you can manifest that. And that's all within your right because it's your pathway and you're just asking to be leveled up in a certain area. Where it becomes a problem and where it becomes what's called black magic, or where you hit this place, and I'm going to explain this other why how it's so bad in a second. When you say, I want this Subaru, whatever, this model, I want it to get for $5,000. I want this job that, I want this administration job at this hospital. I want to get paid this much money, all these, and you do your vision board, all that, which has been totally in the public milieu of what you're supposed to do and manifest. That's black magic because you are imposing your will. Now that sounds like, oh, Denise, you're being so like, well, no, I'm serious. The punishment for that is insanity. That's what happens. Whatever energy you put out, and if you displace someone or try to control someone, that energy comes back to you threefold. And usually what happens, and here's my example of why this is so bad. Okay. My other teacher, the man who was older, who'd done all kinds of things, and he'd been sort of on the forefront of all kinds of reconstituting old ways and studying all of these different old traditions and amalgamating them and coming up with his own variation of them. He and his wife and another couple decided to try out this black mirror magic thing. And they basically flirted with the dark side. They flirted with the dark side and called something they shouldn't have called, I think for bad purpose. I don't know the whole story. All I know is this part of it, that once they did the ritual, the woman who was at the forefront of it, she instantly lost her mind. And I mean, when I say she lost her mind, that moment, everybody in the space knew she had completely shattered her consciousness. She ended up in an insane asylum. She literally lost her mind completely. She never recovered in this lifetime. And I met him probably 30 years after this experience, and she was still insane and in an institution. Okay. Now, what happens? He told me that he knew many, many people who dabbled in the dark arts, and they didn't necessarily dabble with really dark things. They just put a love spell on someone, or they, tried to get this job and they like what we were out there in the milieu of, oh, you should be manifesting your dream job, and here's how you do it. You put down on paper exactly specifics. Don't do that. What ends up happening is that energy comes back and people lose their mind. When you curse someone or hex them or use the dark energy of anger and madness, meanness, cruelty, it comes back to you threefold. And this is why I know people who, if you look at history, why people who do bad things, they end up having bad done to them. And they may skirt things for long enough while the universe uses them for its purpose of teaching. But eventually, what ends up happening is they have a very bad death, they have a very bad ending, and they end up in a space on the other side where they're lost. Okay. How I know this, and I'll go and, you can watch me on the Cosmic Fold talking about this stuff all the time, but just take my word for it. I know that this is what happens. So when people try to control other people, even indirectly, it's bad. So what we're going to do here isn't to try to control anybody or anything. We're going to enlighten ourselves, and we're going to ask others to join us in this transition into the light, into our own evolution. We're not going to force it on anybody. And the more powerful we become in terms of service to the light, to the creator, the more others will see and want to be participants in this. The purpose of this life isn't to get all the stuff, like that bumper sticker used to stay in the 80s. He who has the most toys wins. No, the purpose, and we all know, eventually our final destination is not to be here. We are all destined to die. We're all going to die. That's not news to any of us, but it's something we try to ignore. The reality is we should embrace that, because everything is in preparation for the transition, and this is all a learning place. So the first lesson I'm going to teach is this. You have to be conscious that you never try to impose your will on others, that you are accepting and loving, and that you only increase the love within yourself and the acceptance, and that you radiate that, and that you accept yourself, love yourself. And we're going to work on the next lesson. The first thing you need to learn is how to ground yourself and understand discernment. So this is the precursor, the prelude to learning that next piece. I'm going to break it down into the steps, and we're going to do pieces of this over the next however long it takes, and continue to do once I train you guys and how to be mindful about how to use your own power. We'll use it, but I don't want to put it out there without you knowing the parameters of it, and without you being grounded, without you understanding your own discernment, and without you knowing what you're doing before you do it. So that, my friends, is lesson number 1. Always think, no matter what you're doing, is this for selfish purpose? Am I imposing my will by putting it on somebody, even if my intentions are positive? I want to help this person. Am I forcing that on them? If you are, back out, back away. This person has something to learn, or their choice is to go down a path that maybe you can see they can't, but that's their choice. That is their soul's choice. They have just as much power, and they have just as much spirit, and they have just as much right as you do. All right. Have a good one. You will see me again soon. Please, let's build this channel up so that more and more people can join us on this journey. So let your friends know. As I continue on, I will remind you to do so. And we have to start from the beginning so that people understand the context. I will probably remind everybody every week, but this is a good place to start. Blessings to all. Have a great and wonderful everything. Blessings.